Hello and welcome to the Virtual Reading Roadshow. Thank you all for tuning in and joining us. This Virtual Reading Roadshow is brought to you by Just Like Us in partnership with Amazon and Pink News. It's Pride Month, so there's no better time to talk about LGBT plus visibility and diversity in education. Now, we'd normally do this in schools, but sadly we're not able to do that at the moment. So we've teamed up together to bring the Virtual Reading Roadshow to you online so you can engage with this wherever you are. Now, you've probably heard of Amazon, needs no introduction, biggest online company in the world. And Pink News is a news outlet that specializes in bringing you LGBT plus news and current affairs. So my name is Josh, and I'm from the organization Just Like Us. We have a really simple belief that all young LGBT plus people deserve to live awesome lives. And we try to make this happen by sending our ambassadors into schools all across the UK to deliver their stories of growing up LGBT plus. We hope that by sharing our stories, we can empower everyone in schools to stand up for LGBT plus equality. So I'm going to go into what's going to happen this afternoon a little bit with you. What exactly are we going to do? Well, I'm so delighted to be joined by three wonderful guests. We've got one of our Just Like Us ambassadors with us here today, and we've also got two people from the Amazon LGBT plus staff network, or as they like to quite fabulously call themselves, Glamazonians. Love it. Our JLU ambassador is going to talk to us a bit about sexuality and gender and explaining that a little bit more clearly, and then they're going to tell us their story. We're then going to hand over to the Glamazonians to tell us their story as well. And later on, there will also be time for us to answer any questions you have. So let's do a bit of introduction. We're going to go around and say our names and pronouns. If you're not sure what pronouns are, they're essentially what we refer to people as when we're not using their name. So for example, my pronouns are he, him. If someone was to ask, where's Josh? They might say, he's gone to the shop to get himself some tasty snacks, which is usually the answer to that question. But some people use she, her pronouns. We generally think of he, him as being male and she, her as being female. But some people use they, them pronouns. And these are what we call gender neutral pronouns in that they don't suggest either male or female. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our GLU ambassador. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. It's all going well so far. So I'm Elly. My pronouns are they and them. And as Josh just explained, these are gender neutral pronouns. You use them a lot of the time as a plural to talk about a group of people. You know, the class is listening to the talk. They are paying a lot of attention to me. But you can also use them as a singular gender neutral pronoun, which is what I use for myself. So, you know, in Josh's example, you'd say, oh, where's Elly? Oh, they've gone to the shops. They are buying loads of crisps and they are super unhealthy with their snack choices. So that's me. Yeah.
Awesome. Can we hear from Glamazonian 1?
Hello, I am Liam Sauter. I go by he and him, and I'm a software person. I'm a bit of a nerd, and I'm excited to share some of my experience with you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Liam. Welcome. We welcome nerds here, all the rage. And finally, Glamazonian 2. Hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max. My pronouns are he, him. I also work at Amazon in our retail business. Super excited to get involved here today.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here. We talked about what we're going to do today, but why is that so important? Why come here? Well, a bit of a history lesson. Between 1988 and 2003, LGBT plus issues couldn't be taught in schools and colleges at all. And this was because of a law called Section 28. It basically said that schools can't legally, and I quote, promote homosexuality. And what that meant is that people couldn't really talk about it. It meant that there were no pride groups, that students weren't able as easily to go to staff for support, and there were certainly no inclusive books in the library that talked about LGBT plus people. And this made things quite difficult. It made it hard for LGBT plus young people to find places to turn to, and that affects mental health. Luckily today we can talk about this stuff in schools, and as we can see from the effects of Section 28, it's so important that we do continue to talk about this stuff and move it forward. Now, approximately 1 in 10 people are LGBT+. It's hard to put an exact figure on this. It's a really hard statistic to get because not everyone who is LGBT+ is out. Not everyone is identifying yet. So it's hard to say. And that may not seem like a huge number, but if you think about it as 10%, as in a room full of 1,000 people, 100 of those are going to be LGBT+ at the very least, then that seems like quite a lot of the population, and everyone deserves to feel safe, happy and comfortable throughout their lives, no matter how they identify. And that leads me on to our last point, which is we want to make sure that LGBT+ people and their stories are visible and heard. It's so important to amplify our stories. By listening to people whose stories are kind of similar to ours, it's really empowering. And even if you're not LGBT+, hearing from people that are can give you an insight into that experience and help you to better support your LGBT+ friends. So without further ado, I'm so excited to hand over to our Just Like Us ambassador, Elly. Before they tell their story, they're going to go through some definitions and explain a little bit more clearly the stuff we might be confused about with gender and sexuality. Over to you, Elly.
Hello. So what are we talking about today is the big question. So we're talking about gender and sexuality, and I'm just going to go through a few terms to help you understand, from some really basic stuff that I'm sure you will have heard of to maybe some more complicated language that you may not know yet. So we're going to start with a few words relating to sexuality. So the word straight means attracted to opposite gender. So if you're a man and you're attracted to women, you describe yourself as straight. The word gay means you're attracted to the same gender as yourself. So usually this is used by men. So if you're a man who's attracted to other men, you're a gay man. It's also used to describe women who are attracted to other women, and they also use the word lesbian as well. And bisexual means that you're attracted to more than one gender. So for example, if you are a woman and you're attracted to women and men, that is someone who is bisexual. And sexuality is a spectrum, and this is important to understand because people may not just identify as bisexual, meaning that they are attracted to equally men and women. They may feel different attractions during their lives. Your attractions may change during your life, or you may just stay attracted to the same gender of people your whole life. And all of these are perfectly fine to be and very common. So we're going to talk a little bit about gender as well. So you will probably have heard about in your science classes biological sex. So this refers to when you're born, the doctor takes a little look at you and says, that's a boy or that's a girl based on what he sees. So yes, the word genitals is involved in this. No laughing too much. So yeah, that is biological sex. And that is different to gender slightly. You might be using those words interchangeably in your life, and they are quite similar words, but there is a difference between them. Gender relates to your identity, so it's how you feel, your inner sense of male, female, or something else, or neither. So this is kind of an inner thing. And a lot of the time, your inner feeling of gender will match your outer body, the gender that you were assigned by the doctor at birth, and that is fine. And sometimes it doesn't match. So your inner sense of gender does not match what you were assigned at birth. And so we've got some words to describe that. So we have the word cisgender, which means that you do identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. So if you were born and the doctor said, yep, that's a man, that's a guy, you're raised as a boy, you grow up and you think, yeah, I feel comfortable in masculinity, I feel like a man, that's me, then you are a cisgender person. Transgender is the opposite of this. So it's anybody who does not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. So for example, if you were born as a man, doctor says, okay, you're a guy, you grow up and you think, actually, no, that doesn't fit with me. That doesn't sit comfortably. I actually feel much more stronger affinity to being, I'm a woman inside. And that would make you transgender, as one example. And there's a few more words around different trans identities. So being trans can be split into possibly these 3 categories. So a trans woman is someone who identifies as a woman, has that internal sense of being a woman, was assigned male at birth and raised as a male. Trans man is the opposite of this. So you are a man, but you were assigned female at birth and you've transitioned to male. Non-binary is when you don't identify as either a man or a woman. So you could have been assigned either male or female at birth, and your inner sense feels neither man or woman is correct for you, and you identify as something else, neither of those genders. So that can be quite difficult to understand, but luckily for you, you have me, a real life example of a non-binary person who's going to take you through what that actually means in practice. So just going to describe that gender is a spectrum in the same way as we talked about sexuality. So you can either feel like man, woman, totally 100% job done. You can feel non-binary in a variety of ways, which can mean you fluctuate between masculinity and femininity. You can have a fixed point between masculine and femininity. That's quite a hard word to say. You can be neither. You can feel differently, different days, different times throughout your life. And all of these, again, are perfectly acceptable ways for your gender to present itself and are very common ways that people experience gender. So here's a way that we can kind of break it down and make it a little bit easier to understand. It looks a little complicated, but I'm hoping that as I explain it, you guys will get it. So we've got 3 categories that you could break down gender and sex into. So we have gender identity, which is that inner sense of self that I talked about. Gender expression, which relates to how you present your gender. So it revolves around the clothes that you choose to wear, the way you like to have your hair done, whether you like to wear makeup, what your name is, your pronouns, as we already spoke about. All those things fit into your expression of gender. And biological sex, as we again discussed, is to do with how you were born and raised and your physical body. So this is how I would put myself on these categories. So as you can see, my biological sex is female. So I was born and raised as a girl. My gender identity is sort of, it changes where I would put myself on this, but usually I'm going to stick myself around there, which is sort of more towards the masculine end, but basically I don't feel super masculine or super feminine. I feel just kind of in the middle, taking, dips from each side, I guess. And my gender expression is fairly masculine, not 100%, but most of the time I will be wearing male clothes. I like to have my hair done in a short way. And I like my gender neutral pronouns, which would be more an androgynous expression. So that's an example of that. And just for contrast, the next slide we have is a friend of mine who is a cisgender woman who kindly filled this out for me as well. So her gender identity is woman, her biological sex is female, she was born and raised a woman, and she feels very comfortable that way. Sometimes her gender expression goes towards androgynous. She sometimes likes to wear more masculine clothes and kind of present herself in a more masculine way and have a cropped haircut, things like that. But she still remains a woman in her identity. So that's a little contrast for you, and I hope that helps you understand all of that. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about me, which is amazing. My favorite subject. So we're going to start off with me at school around the age of most of you guys. In this first picture, probably about 12 or 13. So that's me at school. And this was like a really confusing, difficult time, as it is for a lot of you guys around this age. It's a confusing age. There's a lot going on. For me, though, there was an added level of, difficulty and confusion because I felt like there was a level to which I was hiding who I was. I was really trying hard to fit in and make friends. And all my friends around me were girls, and I was like, great. So what I have to do to fit in here and to have friends is to dress and act the same way as my friends are doing to fit in, have the same interests, look the same, feel the same. And so I was kind of hiding any aspect of my difference that I hadn't even sort of explored yet, because I was just like, no, I don't want to be different from anyone else. I just want to fit in with everyone and then I'll be able to have friends. So this was really difficult and I needed some kind of release from this. And I did have this really fun hobby, which is cosplaying. And I don't know if you guys know what cosplaying is, so I will just explain it for those of you who don't. It's basically where you dress up as your favorite character from the TV, movies, books, comics, whatever. And you go to a convention and you find lots of other people dressed up as their favorite characters, and you have fun like pretending to be that character and just having a bit of like, you know, maybe it's childish, I don't know. I really enjoy it. And more so than just being a big nerd, I really enjoyed this because it meant that I could try out a lot of different identities. I could see what it would be like to be a different person. So, you know, for example, here we have Wolverine and Captain Jack from Doctor Who, both of who are amazing characters. And I was just like, oh, what would it be like if I was these guys? This would be fun. And trying on different ways of being. And it was really a great experience for me. And in a way, I felt more like myself in these characters' costumes than I did when I was wearing my own clothes at home, which was something very strange. So this was the situation. And then out of nowhere, here comes me getting a crush on a girl. And I'm like, whoa, this is out of nowhere, because I had been having crushes on guys. Me and my friends had all been chatting about what the crushes on boys that we had in school. And I was like, oh, this is so weird. Like, am I a lesbian now? Is this how that works? I don't know. Was it, you know, were all those crushes that I've already had on boys not real, and this is real? Or maybe this crush on a girl isn't real. So basically I was massively confused, which is a theme of my entire story, by the way. And so I did what every sensible person does, and I typed it into Google to find out what on earth was going on with me. And I found this word bisexual, and this is the bisexual pride flag on the screen. And this was like such a freeing find for me that I realized that I could be bisexual, because I was like, wow, I now don't have to choose between like, oh, do I like men or do I like women? I can just say, well, whoever I like, and that's really just so freeing. It's something I just don't feel like I need to worry about now. So the next thing that came up was now I was suddenly a member of the LGBT community, which I'd heard about, but I didn't know anyone around me who was a part of that community. And I didn't know how to fit in with that. I didn't feel ready to come out yet. I'd only just decided for myself who I felt like I wanted to describe my identity. And I really wasn't ready to share that with anybody. And so I went onto YouTube to find people with similar experiences to me, to try and find some kind of connection to other people and to see how other people dealt with the same things that I was coming up against. So I reached out and I found all of these stories. And through that, I found channels like these three people on the screen, who are trans men YouTubers. And I hadn't even heard of trans people before this time. And I was like listening to these people's stories and I was like, oh, these people were raised as girls and they really didn't feel comfortable with that. When they were being female, they felt like they were pretending, they were putting on this like facade of reality. And I was like, oh, I really can relate to that. That sounds a lot like me. So this really helped me feel like, oh, maybe it's not just me that feels this way. But I stopped having sort of identifying with these people when they sort of said, but then I transitioned to a man and I began to present myself as a man, be treated as a man, and that solved all the problems of this, that it made me feel a lot happier to be treated and act male. And I was like, that wouldn't solve it for me. That didn't quite hit the right button, which is quite hard to describe if you haven't experienced. But a metaphor that I like to use is that it felt like trying on different pairs of shoes, I guess. So like the shoes that were like my girl shoes that I was wearing for my whole life were like too tight, really uncomfortable. And like, I definitely did not want to be wearing those. And then there was like these guys offering this new pair of shoes, which were like, okay, well, they don't rub in the same places, but they're too big and they don't really fit comfortably with me. So I was like, well, neither man or woman makes sense for me. So even if I did transition to male, this wouldn't be right. So basically, still confused. At this point, I finished school. And so I tried out every single hairstyle and color that there was available, just to, the freedom of not having to wear my school uniform anymore and follow all of those rules. I was like, I can do what I want. I can dress how I want. And so I was just sort of finding myself and seeing how I wanted to present myself. And this was a really great time because the friends that I had around me were really supportive of, like, me trying out different looks, and all the time were really positive about, like, oh, it's really great, like how you're, trying out different stuff, and they would help me with this. And that made me feel really supported in this experimentation about who I wanted to be. And so I was still connecting to these trans stories. I was still, whenever I saw a book or heard of a film or a YouTube channel about trans people, I was still just drawn to it because I felt like I resonated with it somehow. And this was when I found this book, which is by Jacob Tobiah, which is an amazing book. And it totally changed how I thought about gender, because Jacob Tobiah is a non-binary person, and they wrote in this book about their life growing up as non-binary and how that altered their experiences and just how it made them feel. And basically just said, like, that is an option. Like, you can choose your favorite things from either the male or the female column. You can mix and match. You can just do whatever you like. And I was like, wow, there's people are living like this. I didn't know that. And I didn't know that was an option that I could choose. And so that was like the kind of the light bulb moment where I was like, wow, that's what I've been looking for. Like, that's the word that describes me that I've been looking for. And so, like, that was like the moment, which takes me to now, where this is some more recent pictures of me. I've just finished my degree. I've just started my first job. And I'm now like a proud bisexual, non-binary nerd, proud of all of these things. And I am able to be my authentic self. And just to call back to what I was originally saying at the start of this story, I definitely was so worried about how people would take it when I came out as something really different to what my friends were. And I thought, oh, being different is gonna make me really not be able to get on with people in the same way. But actually, what I found was that when I was being my authentic self, people really just resonated with me more because they felt like I was sharing myself, and that's what people wanted from me. Actually, having kept up that fake trying to fit in persona, I'd been pushing people away because they couldn't get to know the real me, and they could kind of sense that. And so finding my actual self has now meant that the people that I speak to as myself, they know me better, and so we can connect on a better level. So it's really important to celebrate where you're different from people and know that it's not gonna make you any less popular. It's actually gonna make your life a lot better to fully embrace yourself and to explore what it means to be yourself. So that's my story. Thank you for listening. And I hope you got something useful from it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elly. Really, really valuable message about being your authentic selves. And also, I love how much a big part of your story is about exploring gender expression as well. That can be such a great way to mark your journey and sort of find your way into what your identity is. I'm going to hand over to our first Glamazonian, which is really, really exciting. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Liam. Hi, Liam.
Hello.
Awesome. Ready to tell your story?
I am indeed.
Amazing. So Liam's going to tell us his story, then we'll hear from Max, but the floor is all yours. So take it away.
Cool. So hello, everyone. My name is Liam Sauter, as you can tell on the slide. I am a developer evangelist at Amazon, which is essentially a professional nerd. My job is to teach people how to use our software, how to implement certain features. So every time you go on to, say, your Fire TV, which I'm sure you have, and you go and watch a new show on Disney Plus, the features that are in those apps are the things that I try and get people to do. Outside of my work, I'm a community manager. I'm also a Discord partner. I'm sure many of you use Discord already. And I run an online community for game developers. So we have about 15,000 people in there, and we try and make game development as accessible as possible. Be that through events, be that through creating an environment that helps people learn in a really constructive way. As you might suspect, I'm also a game developer. So I have a game on Steam called Rock God Tycoon. It's a few years old now, but it's that was my first foray into my first attempt at creating games for multiple environments. So take a look at that. The intro is much cooler than the game. The game itself is quality-wise. And also I'm a startup founder. So I founded a company that creates Alexa apps. I ran that for about 3 years. I hired on some developers. And then a few months ago, I sold the company to come and work at Amazon. So that's sort of my little journey there. As far as the LGBT side goes, I am this one. I am the B, which means I am bisexual. I like both girls and guys. So that's a little bit about me. Let's go on to my origin story. So growing up in the northwest of England in a town called Blackpool, not a great place. I wouldn't recommend it. If any of you from Blackpool, I'm sorry, but it's a town where word doesn't travel that much when it comes to LGBT, or at least it didn't when I grew up there. Which can be quite difficult, especially if you're trying to explore yourself or these terms, because the environment back then was very different to where it is now. I think now we're in a much better position, a much more educated position on how to explore those things yourself, how to find resources. And I think that's something you should definitely take advantage of if you think you might be in that category. It's a really confusing time for me. I had feelings for both guys and girls. So I didn't really know if I was configured right, which is sort of a sense that, you grow up with this standard where everyone in your area, and, it's not like the 1 in 10 that you'd expect from people. This was where, maybe 1 in 500 people would be openly gay or openly LGBT. And growing up LGBT like that was a very strange experience for me. So again, appreciate the resource you have now. Back in, 40 years ago, again, even then it was an entirely different scene. And, throughout my whole time growing up, I didn't really have any relationships. I had a girlfriend on RuneScape in 2007. If you've not played RuneScape, you're missing out. I highly recommend it. Very good game. So my story kind of starts with going online one day, and I accidentally met someone in an online chat room. This chat room was nothing to do with being LGBT. It was just about movies. Very generic. This guy was from Sweden. He knew some English. He was pretty good with English, better English than some people in my school actually. So give credit to those guys. And we didn't even know that we were compatible. I didn't know he was gay. He didn't know I was bi. I didn't really know I was bi at this point, to be honest. But it's something that we sort of discovered together. And after about 2 months of talking, we started to get a bit more serious. I sent a message one day saying 143 because I was too nervous to say anything else. 143 is a code word back then for I love you. 1 being the amount of characters in I, 4 characters in love, 3 in you. And he asked me, what does that mean? I said, oh, don't worry, never mind. He went and Googled what that meant, and he was like 1433, which means I love you too, which is probably the corniest way that you could start a relationship, but that's kind of where we started. And if it wasn't for those 3 letters, then I wouldn't be here now. As far as how I came out, as far as people finding out that I'm bisexual, I just posted my relationship status online, that I'm together with my partner, now fiance, which I should also mention, I didn't tell my parents at this point. I didn't really feel the need to come out. If you're straight, you don't come out as straight. So I never really saw the need to come out as bi. Some people do, if it's something that's important to you, definitely do that if that's what you want. But for me personally, I didn't really feel the need for that. So it was very interesting getting a call one morning asking, Liam, why are you in a relationship with a man on Facebook? Which is quite a strange call to get from your parents. But yeah, it was very strange being in a long-term relationship. He's from Sweden, I'm from the UK. It's not some way you can just hop on a bus and come over. So we started visiting each other back and forth every 6 months. As far as my parents know, he was just my friend from Sweden, which obviously wasn't the case, but I know it's something that came out in time. But yeah, so that was 2013. Let's look at where we are now. 7 years later, these are our pictures slowly growing up together. We did technically 5 years of long distance, which there's definitely struggles with long distance. If you can find someone local, it's much more convenient. I can promise you that, and much cheaper as well. But yeah, as far as like growing up together goes, it was a really nice experience. We got to visit each other every 6 months. I got to learn some Swedish culture. Jag pratar lite svenska. For the like one person that understands Swedish, you'll appreciate that line. And it was a good chance for us to, learn about each other as we grow up and learn about each other's cultures, learn about each other's family. Sweden's really nice in the summer as well. That's another good reason to date a Swedish person. Highly recommend it. And yeah, this was sort of how we grew up. You can see there in 2017, we're hugging as we had to leave the airport. I think it was the last summer of 2017 was the first time we didn't cry at the airport. Because this is the person that you text every day, that you FaceTime every day, and to be with them for a week and then have to leave, it's kind of heartbreaking. But knowing that you're going to see them again soon and eventually live together really gets us through it. 2018, we moved in together. My partner flew over from Sweden. We're living together now. That's us in our first apartment, looking very cool, drinking some water, as you should, stay hydrated. And yeah, that's about where we were then. And, it blows my mind that this random guy that I just so happened to meet in a very specific time on a website in 2013 is now one of the biggest parts of my life and is now someone I live with. So that's crazy to me. As far as where I am now, I've done a bunch of things since then. I've been organizing events. So I run an event in Birmingham called Hack the Midlands. It's a place where we have about 300 people come in every year to get creative with tech. We want people to be creative, explore different areas that they're interested in, make a website, make a game, make an app, just something to get you creating things. Big logistical challenge trying to feed 300 people. If you count the amount of people in your class and having to make food for that times 10, it's a lot of the work. Another thing I do is I run this online development community where we support Pride every year. So for 1 month of the year during Pride Month, we will don these really nice Pride colors to show that, to these 15,000 people. And, these are people that are working on AAA games as well. So Call of Duty, Battlefield, Skyrim, all those games. These are professional industry people, and it's a standard there. So, being LGBT, it's not something that's going to impact your professional life. I've done just fine. I've not had any barriers. But we're really lucky because, in the UK, in most parts of Europe and in the West, we don't really have that much prejudice here. There are still some small little sectors that, it's kind of silly that they're still there. But when you consider that there are parts of the world where you can go to jail for being LGBT, it sort of shows that the level of understanding that we have here, and it shows how far behind these other people are. And I think that's a shame. And, whether you're LGBT, whether you're not LGBT, you can still play a role in making people feel comfortable, making people feel themselves, making people feel their best selves. So I do have some final tips of advice. And those are, one, the LGBT community is there for you. This is not something you have to do alone. There are so many people out there, be that online. There's articles, there's forums, there's limitless resources that you have now that weren't around 5, 10, 15 years ago. You can do all this anonymously if you're not ready for the point of other people knowing yet. And that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't be afraid of being yourself. You know, it's who you are. The skills that you have and the skills that you learn growing up, you know, that's tied down to the effort you put in. That has nothing to do with your sexuality. Your sexuality is just who you love, and that shouldn't make a difference. It's kind of silly to even imagine that some people think that it should. Some of the most successful people I know are LGBT. So yeah, honestly, do not worry about that. Make use of resources. So like I said, articles, forums. There's also a lot of support lines out now. So, you know, if maybe your parents are at the house, just give them a call. You know, do that on your mobile, on the home phone. Maybe wipe the history afterwards if you're that conscious about it. But yeah, honestly, just do not worry about it. And finally, probably the biggest one is come out in your own time. Don't feel any pressure to come out at a certain day or by a certain year or a certain age. You come out whenever you feel like it. And if you don't feel the need to come out like I did, that's fine too. Again, this is all about the person that you feel attraction for. This is nothing to do with anyone else. This is all about you. So, you know, be yourself, be comfortable, and yeah, just stick at it. And if you know someone who's LGBT, just support them. Let them know that it's fine to be who they want to be.
Awesome. Liam, thank you so much. Absolutely amazing story. Worthy, I think, of being turned into a film one day, personally.
Oh, maybe. Who's going to play me, though?
Oh, I don't know. Suggestions welcome, everyone, by the way.
Comment in the chat.
Who play Liam in the movie of his life. And also 143, my heart melts. You've thawed my icy heart, so well done.
Thank you.
It's time to hear from our second Glamazonian now and our last story of the session. So, Max, if you're there, I'm going to hand over to you now. How are you doing?
Fab, thanks, Josh. No, really good, thank you. Cool. So this is a little bit about me. So this is a picture of me on the left. I'm Max. I'm a brand specialist here at Amazon. In what that means in more detail is I work with our sellers online to help you get the products you want in front of your front door, which can sometimes be a little bit stressful, but you know, we're here. It's a great job. I identify as gay. I've had a bit of a roller coaster journey getting here, and here's a little bit about me and my journey. So my story wasn't crystal clear. Here's a few pictures of me growing up throughout the years that I went into my Facebook from about 10 years ago to find. And I actually had girlfriends in secondary school. I probably had about 4 or 5 girlfriends up until about year 9. And to me, that felt completely normal. You know, everything was fine at the time. Then I started to kind of process some emotions that I was thinking I was bi, because I started to have some feeling towards men. And then I came quite open about that with my friends. I was like, hey, I'm having these feelings. And then I turned to them and everything was completely fine. And then a couple of years later, then I realized that I was getting more and more feelings towards men and less towards women. So then I came to the conclusion that I was gay. And then I came open to my friends about that. When I was growing up in school, we weren't really taught about same-sex relationships in school. So it was a bit challenging for me, and my journey was a bit confusing at times. You know, I didn't just wake up one morning and be like, oh, you know, I'm gay, I'm bi. It didn't work like that. It was more of a slow journey of me processing my emotions, feelings, realizing that what I was experiencing was different to that of my friends, and then coming to the conclusion of my identity of who I was. And then I also realized that actually sexuality is quite fluid. I think, as Elly mentioned earlier in the journey, it's more of a spectrum. So there is no kind of one size fits all box for everyone. It's how you identify, and you're probably quite unique in that. And then on this slide, there's a picture of Daniel Radcliffe. Absolutely my first crush as a young guy. Harry Potter was a big part of my life growing up. I loved the films. So he was my first crush. So then the second part for me was, after I discovered these emotions, was about confirmation about who I was. I never sat down with my parents and had the typical coming out story as such. I think over time I knew my emotions, and I had a really good relationship with my mum. I'm very close to my mum, so therefore she was quite in touch with that. Sometimes my relationship sexuality would come up in conversations, and I felt okay talking about that. But I never felt the need to say, to really come out and sit down and say, "Hi, I'm Max, I'm gay." It didn't come to me like that. But I do value kind of that open communication. So it definitely benefited me in my journey of, communicating my sexuality to my parents. And you should never really feel the need to justify it to anyone. You first focus on yourself, make sure that you're in touch with your emotions, and then think about everyone else afterwards, because it's a tricky thing for you to process. So once I started really openly talking about my sexuality with my friends and my family, it didn't really come as much as a surprise. I found it a little bit underwhelming, actually. I think sometimes we build it up in our heads and they're like, oh, how are they going to react? But they're just like, oh, okay, it was pretty normal, just a standard conversation. Here's a couple of pictures from me at school. So me in my last day of year 11, last day of sixth form, graduating university top right, and then on the top left is me at my first Pride celebration. And this was kind of reaching out to my friends and also building a LGBT plus network really helped me become comfortable with who I was and expressing my kind of sexual orientation with people. And that network of people I still hold dear to me today, and it's ever evolving. Cool. So the next step of my journey and kind of where I'm at today is about giving back. I find a lot of what I do right now, hence why I'm on this video call with all you wonderful people, is about giving back to people, because it not only it helps you, if I can share a bit of my insight and my journey, it might help you along your path. But it also helps me because it makes me feel good about myself, and also it makes me feel like I'm giving back to the community and reaffirming my beliefs and the struggles that I've been through, and hopefully helping other people with that. So I tried to do a lot internally at Amazon with our internal networks here, because I feel comfortable doing so. Our company is quite an open company, and therefore I can feel free to talk about that kind of stuff. So I'd strongly suggest, if you ever get to a point later on in life where you are comfortable with your sexuality and you feel like you're in a position where you can talk about it to people you probably don't know that well, I'd really encourage you to do the same, because it will help others, and also it will help you find further confirmation with who you are. So that's a little bit about my story. Now I've got 3 quick tips as a little takeaway. So tip number 1, there is no right coming out story. Coming out, for those who aren't aware, is when you kind of first publicly talk about you and your sexuality to your family and friends. What I'd say is everyone follows their own path. Some people come out early, some people come out later, some people don't come out at all. Some people, if you're like me, come out as different multiple identities along the way, and that's absolutely fine. Something I've learned quite recently is that this journey never ends. As you develop, there will be parts of you that grow new to yourself, and it's all personal, right? So do not stress about how you feel or how to come out. Don't worry about who you're going to tell first, how you're going to say it. Don't worry about that, because I think sometimes you can, if you are in that situation where you feel like you want to talk, you can build all this unnecessary pressure in your head that can really cause a lot of stress. So don't worry about that. Worry about yourself first and foremost. And when you kind of release that pressure, it allows you to really find who you are. So tip number 2, I love this quote here. Tip number 2, being who you are is your greatest advantage. And I put in this little quote here from Dr. Zeus that says, "Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is you than you." I think when I was growing up, I thought that being gay or being bi might be a bit of a burden on my life, might be quite a struggle. What if it prevented me from going for a job? What if I couldn't talk to my friends about it? What if it affected future relationships? But actually, I found a really useful tool for me was turning that around and seeing it as an advantage. I can only really speak from my experiences, but I found being in a minority groups given me a kind of a different perspective on the world, and it's given me a level of empathy and compassion which I don't think I would have developed otherwise. And I can consider being gay to be one of my greatest strengths as a person. So you may not see it now, but I promise you, if you are LGBT plus, you will look back one day and discover that it is one of your superpowers. So that's tip number 2. And then tip number 3, final tip here, is find your heroes. So these are my 3 heroes, and it doesn't matter however they identify, whatever their story is, whether they're LGBT or not, it doesn't matter. But it's important that you find people who give you hope and who give you strength and something to aim for in the future. You know, sometimes life can get a bit tricky, regardless of, you know, your orientation or whatever. And you need to find hope and faith from somewhere. So these are my 3 here. You probably see most of them before. So woman on the left obviously is Michelle Obama. I love what she does with education and girls' rights in America. Guy in the middle is Tim Cook. He, for those who don't know, is the CEO of Apple, and he's still one of the only openly gay CEOs there is of that level. So I really admire him for that brave stance there. And then on the right, Greta Thunberg. You may have been on a protest of herself, but I really look up to her. You know, even though she's half my age, and you know she's a lot younger than people older than me, it doesn't stop her from talking about what she feels right and pushing for change. And I think we now live in an era where you can go online, you can search, and you can find anyone, you know, from different backgrounds, beliefs, orientations, which has been a fantastic resource to help you discover who you are, and then confirm, you know, who I am, and that's how I want to be. So I'd really encourage you to do that. You know, take some time, do your homework, get out there, research, find your heroes. So that's a bit about me. So thank you very much, and back over to Josh.
Yay, well done. That was awesome. If you haven't and are able to watch Michelle Obama's documentary on Netflix, do, because it's fantastic. So great. Thank you all so much. I think it's been really, really nice. A lot of the time, we tend to hear about all the negative stuff, how LGBT plus young people face high levels of bullying and discrimination. And while all that's true, and we should fight for more equality, this has actually been really great in showing people that, you know, growing up LGBT plus can be a really, really positive experience as well. And I love, Max, how you said that you see it to be your superpower. I think that's true of myself as well. So we do have a few questions, which is really exciting. We're moving to the Q&A. We probably don't have time for all the questions that have come in, but we're going to do our best. So the first question I have is, what should you say when someone comes out to you? So maybe this is someone who isn't LGBT plus, but a friend has come out to them. What's the most supportive thing you can say? Am I okay to ask you that one, Max?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people ask that question because sometimes, you know, if you are LGBTQ and someone's coming out to you, you have a bit of experience. But what if you're not? You know, what if you identify as a straight person? What do you say? My best advice would be in that situation, so not really think about what you're going to say. Try and think about the person in front of you. You know, ask them how they feel. Ask them about their experiences. So if you really focus on that person in front of you, you're going to have a much more kind of deeper understanding of them and their struggles and how you can help. So I wouldn't focus too much about, oh, you know, I need to say the right thing. I need to say this, that, and the other. You know, I need to tick boxes. It's not about that. I'd really just urge you just to listen to that person, and then it should come naturally what you would say back to them in that situation. You know, sometimes they'll find it easy to come out to you. Sometimes they find it difficult, and it's really important to be in tune with that.
I agree. That's totally true. I guess you can't empathize if you're not LGBT plus, but that's why you want to put their voice out there and ask, what do you need from me? I think that's super, super important. I'm going to ask this one for Elly. Do all non-binary people use they, them pronouns? Good question.
Yeah, very good question. And the answer is no, not all non-binary people use they and them pronouns. Some people will use he and him pronouns, some will use she and her, some people will use a mixture and say, well, whatever pronoun you want to throw at me is fine. And some people will use their own pronouns that are more sort of less known about, which you can look up yourself if you're interested in that. There's a lot of like people who have come up with what are referred to as neo-pronouns. So they're pronouns that have been sort of newly invented language in the last few sort of decades. And that's super interesting if you're some kind of language nerd as well as an LGBT nerd. But basically, pronouns are a part of your gender expression. They are not a part of your gender identity, as we talked about earlier. So different people will use different pronouns and they will have different reasons for what they feel comfortable with. And it may just be gut feeling that they prefer something over another thing. But it is really important to make sure that you respect whoever's telling you that their pronouns are what they are. They're going to spend some time figuring out what they prefer, or maybe they're just trying it to say, like, can you try using this pronoun for me and see how it feels? And you have to take it person by person. So you can ask what pronouns people use if you're not sure. That's usually the best way to go about it. And just make sure that you are respecting people's pronouns. And like, inevitably, if you've known someone as sort of a he, him for a long while, and suddenly they're a she, her, that's going to be a little bit of a mental adjustment, and you are going to make some mistakes. And no one is expecting you to be like a superhero and get it right every time. Although if you do that, that's amazing. But yeah, just like if you don't get it right every time, that's totally fine. But your reaction is important. So you need to just correct yourself quickly and don't make a big thing about it, because that might make the situation just a whole lot bigger than it needs to be. If you just slip of the tongue, you know, you just say, oh, sorry, I meant he, and then carry on with your sentence. And that is totally fine. So that was a long answer, but I hope that answered about 5 questions.
I think really, really useful and actually really practical advice that you gave there. I thought that was fantastic. And just to be clear, it's like, it's okay to ask for people's pronouns. People feel awkward about it, but it's cool. I think we need to normalize that a little bit more. Think about how you might be able to do that, like in your school, for example. Maybe that's just maybe when your teachers have you at the start of a new year, they introduce you by name and pronouns, for example. Just normalizing that, I think, will be really, really useful. I've got another question in, and this one is for Liam. Do bi people face challenges that lesbian and gay people don't? And that's super interesting. Liam, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So yeah, there's a few sort of misconceptions or a few places where people try to meme on you a little bit. I'd probably say the biggest one is that, if you're identifying as male and then you date a female, even if you're bi, that doesn't make you straight. And that's where people start memeing on it, because they think, oh, this person's just turned back to being straight now. It's not the case. It just means that just so happens to be with who you're being with at that time. Say if you're dating a girl, they might think that you're going to leave them for a guy. If you're a guy dating a guy, they might think you're going to leave them for a girl. It's not as fluid as that. It's just a case of, you're with who you're with because you love them, not because you want to leave them for a certain gender later down the line. I'd probably say another one is that sometimes it might feel like you're not accepted in either community because you're not fully gay, you're not fully straight. So where do you sit on that? And the reality is, it's just, that's not the case at all. It's just, see it as people loving each other. The LGBT community is just people who are categorized in a certain way based on their, preferences. And that's all there is to it. It's not like you're missing out, being with one or the other. So honestly, do not worry about that.
100%. And I think that's really important in that rhetoric that sometimes bi people get, that, oh, it's just a phase or a stepping stone. Actually, for some people that is part of a journey, but for many people that's an absolutely valid identity, and it's important that that's respected and certainly not erased. So I've got another question. Max, I'm going to put this one to you, because obviously people watching are mostly going to be at school, but this one is sort of about later in life. Have you always felt completely comfortable to be openly LGBT plus in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. From my experience, I have. I've been very fortunate to have worked in companies that have been very accepting, very inclusive. But it comes down to you. It depends whether you're comfortable with that. I think you should always stay in tune with where you are on your journey. And if you're, similar stage to me and you feel comfortable, by all means do it. But I wouldn't put pressure on yourself to come out because you feel like you have to come out. I really hope by the time that you all get to the age, you're leaving education, you're looking for your first job, that every employer will be, open, accepting, and you can be in the position where you feel like you don't, to be in the position where you don't even need to think about it. I think that's a key thing for me. I think when I first did talk about my sexuality at work, it did feel a bit odd, I think. And I think, that's completely normal for people because it's something that's quite different. And, you're not employed necessarily to talk about your sexuality, you're employed to do your job. So that did feel a bit odd for me. But yeah, I've been very fortunate. But you need to take it on a case-by-case basis. Look at your team around you. How supportive are they? Look at the company. Have they got progressive policies in there? Have they got, good resource network there? But it's up to the individual ultimately, but I would say, referencing back to my presentation earlier, if you are in the position where you can be open at work, it is good because given that visibility to other people, it almost gives them permission to therefore talk about their presence at work.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great that, companies are having these LGBT plus staff networks like Amazon are, that give that sense of community and belonging and sort of like camaraderie between the LGBT plus employees. This is one I'm going to put to Elly, actually. Elly, what makes a great ally? And would you be able to explain as well, for those listening who might not know what that means, what is an ally?
Yeah, so allyship is something that you will hear about a lot in reference to LGBT communities and also other minority communities. There's a lot of the Black community is doing a lot of protesting and action right now. You'll be hearing a lot about them and about being a good ally to that community as well as floating around a lot. So just to clarify what that means, it basically just means that you're a friend of that community, you're a supporter, you're a champion of rights for those people. So in practice, it would mean that you maybe are not an LGBT plus person, but you strongly believe in LGBT plus rights, not only within yourself, but also in your actions. So ways that you can demonstrate that can be like speaking positively about LGBT plus people in your conversation, whether there's other LGBT plus people around or not. If you're just chatting to a lot of cisgender and straight friends, and someone brings up LGBT plus issues, you being a strong champion of positivity in that is a really important ally step. Things like standing up if you see some injustice going on, because you may have more confidence, feel more comfortable to be able to speak up, whereas actually if someone is being discriminated against, something you might come across in school, people being called names or something, and you would be being a great ally by saying that's not okay, reporting it to someone on staff, like something like that would be a really good ally move. You can also in your school look at starting up a pride group if you want to do something like that, would be amazing, where you can create a space where LGBT plus people and other allies can come and discuss how they can help people and just have fun as well, because like LGBT plus people have a lot of fun when they get together. Like maybe that's a stereotype, but our music and TV is amazing. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elly. Absolutely. I think in summary, being a great ally, it basically just means being a good friend and supporter, doesn't it? And there are so many ways in which you can do that. The last thing I wanted to ask, and I'm going to put this out to everyone really, really quickly, because I know we're getting a bit tight on time. What's everyone doing for Pride this year? Obviously, events are cancelled. So things are moving virtually and all that sort of stuff. Or are you celebrating at home? Liam, what are you doing for Pride this year?
Yeah, so I touched a little bit on this before, but so in our community, we run Pride every year for a month. And this is to sort of normalize being LGBT in the games industry. And, like I said, we have people from, every game studio across the world. And just to sort of show you like how normalized this is, we have about 15,000 people in there, and maybe every year, like 20 people leave because we support Pride, which shows sort of one that they're missing out, slightly off topic. One of my favorite hobbies to do is to go on Facebook and look at the people who are very anti-LGBT back when I was at school and see what they're doing now. And it is a treat. That is the biggest confidence boost I will ever have. But for the most part, the people who are really critical aren't the people you should be listening to. They spend too much time worrying about other people. So just focus on yourself. Pride is supposed to be an event to normalize being LGBT, is to show support for those people. And whether you're an ally, whether you're LGBT, it's just about acceptance. And that's something that we try and promote in our game development community every year.
Absolutely. I think absolutely brilliant. And there's so many ways you can sort of celebrate Pride from the safety and comfort of your homes as well, even though the parades aren't happening and the events around the country have been postponed at least. Bake rainbow cakes, watch some LGBT plus films, do all that stuff. Virtual Pride call with your friends. Just Like Us actually have a Pride playlist, which you can look up on our socials, which may be the perfect soundtrack. I'm going to call an end to the questions there, but thank you so much for all those answers, and thank you so much as well for all the questions that came in. They were all absolutely amazing. I just want to say another thank you to Elly, to Liam, and to Max for joining me today for the Virtual Reading Roadshow and sharing your stories. I hope everyone listening feels inspired. I know personally that hearing those stories when I was at school would have made such a huge difference to me. Now, before we go, I just want to encourage everyone watching to champion LGBT plus equality, and just know that if you are LGBT plus, listen to that advice that the Glamazonians and Elly have given, that it's so fine to be you, and people support you, and you have a right to be who you are freely, happily and comfortably, and you will. I would also say, if there are teachers watching us today, if your school hasn't already signed up to School Diversity Week, please do so by signing up at it's really hard to say that, there we go, justlikeus.org/SDW. You can sign up to School Diversity Week. You get a bunch of resources and you join a nationwide celebration of diversity in education. So do that. It's so worth it. I would also say we're all online a lot at the moment, learning online. It's really important to stay safe. The Just Like Us website does have some tips on this. If you go to there we go, got it right that time, justlikeus.org/betteronline, there's some great tips about how you can stay safe throughout this period. So once again, huge thank you. Let's all come together, champion LGBT plus equality, and cheers for tuning in, and a big thank you once again to our guests. Have a lovely rest of your week. Goodbye.